All right, welcome to the GovAI Podcast, where innovation meets governance. Each episode, we go beyond the buzzwords to explore how AI is reshaping public service. From real-world success stories to the tough lessons of adoption, we'll uncover the future of government, one decision at a time. Today, we're joined by good friend and disruptive innovator in the world of GovTech, Anh Selissen, the Chief Information Officer for the Texas Department of Transportation, where she oversees one of the largest, most complex public sector technology operations in the country. Anh spent more than 2 decades across both the public and private sectors, but what stands out is not just the scale of what she runs, but how she runs it. If you don't follow Anh on LinkedIn, this is your cue right now to go and do so right now. She is brought into TxDOT as a change agent and has immediately done some transformative, amazing work, also navigating some of the most complicated, complex situations, including a ransomware attack and a global pandemic. In the midst of all of this, she brings a rare combination of operational discipline, clarity and decision-making, and a deep commitment in delivering outcomes that actually matter to people on the ground. Anh, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and you're very kind in your words. I appreciate you.
I'll kick us off on, and thank you as well from my side for joining it. We followed the AI strategy updates, and I think TxDOT was one of the first to really come out with a comprehensive AI strategy. I dare say almost in the country initially in the first year it came out.
Yep.
But then very quickly you followed up the next year in 2026 in January with your updated AI strategy, which was a bit unusual to completely rehaul it. In it, there was a big focus on agentic AI and kind of new state laws as some of the key drivers around there. I'm really curious to get in your head about what was the decision behind doing such a quick update so quickly 1 year after, what led to that decision to do a whole, and I wouldn't call it a rehaul because it was an update, but taking into account agentic AI so early now in 2026?
I believe that the main reason why we wanted to come out and provide an update, because it was written all internally. We didn't outsource any of the writing of the update, because we have seen with all of the implementations that we did in the previous years, the huge benefit and gains that we saw from an ROI perspective for TxDOT. With all of the changes, right, and also the perspective on the economy, also, the governor coming out with, some of the policy changes that, with the Texas Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance Act, we really wanted to show that we were being progressive, but in a thoughtful way. And we really wanted to share that because the current strategic plan update really lays out how we're operationalizing AI, right? Which is very, very different. You can lay out a strategic plan, but how you roll out that strategic plan is really the game changer, right? And so we are basically rolling it out thoughtfully through a governance process. And we wanted to show the nation that we're also being methodical at looking at the ROI, at looking at the progress that's being made and really documenting what's working, and then really moving it to that next level of iteration of the success stories. Where are we seeing the biggest bang for the buck? Where are we now seeing how we're going to evaluate future use cases so that we can start implementing more agentic AI so that we can actually drive down, right, inefficiencies and really looking at where we can really benefit the agency. And so it was written internally because we know what we're doing. We are being thoughtful of what we're doing. We're putting strong governance and risk management frameworks around what we're doing, and we're seeing outcomes, and we wanted to show that and really articulate that.
Was there something, I'm curious, between 25 and 26 that you took out, or where you wrote in 25 that in 26 you said, well, maybe this shifted a little bit from what our original perspective was on the AI strategy?
I don't really think so, and here's why. We built the strategic plan around existing governance processes that we have put in place the last 6.5 years. It was built around strong best practices from an IT perspective with governance around how do you select projects that you work on? How do you track projects that you work on? How do you govern that project from a technology perspective with risk management for security, with data governance, right, to make sure that you're not putting sensitive information in there. I think the only thing that really we're changing out of it is the human piece, where we're making sure that there is actual human in the loop. And how are we basically going to operationalize that accountability with human in the loop? That is what you're going to see more in the update is we're putting in place more of a scorecard to evaluate how do we select AI projects. That is the one difference, right? And then we're also putting in place that workforce enablement. And those are more human factors that change, but the overall technology factors have stayed the same and actually are being leveraged with normal best practices that you do if you were to select any, product or solution.
Yeah, I love that. And I know, one thing that's come up in our conversations is really the cornerstone of your strategy is around your enterprise data platform. We've talked
Yes,
at length
yes,
about bad data in, bad data out.
yes,
And, you've consolidated over 97 different data solutions. And for other
yes.
CIOs that are listening, tell us a little bit about this data foundation as you start to think about all the work that you're now doing with AI. How critical is that? How would they approach that?
I think it's very critical because you can have any type of technology strategic plan, whether it's AI or not, but if your data is not in a good place, right? It's not cleansed, it's not categorized, it's not put in some type of systematic standardization way, you're not going to be able to produce that holistic data outcome, right? We spent the last year really looking at what have we produced with our EDP. My recommendation to anyone doing it is first look at where are your key data sources, right? Because you don't want to consume everything. That doesn't make sense. But what are your core data elements that really provide the business the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to being able to derive solutions for the agency? Bring in the key business stakeholders so that you can really seek to understand and produce a partnership as to how do we bring it in to the EDP in a way that makes sense to you, the layman, and not necessarily to IT. Look at what are some common fields that you need to standardize, right? To make sure that no matter what type of sources that we bring in, common fields are standardized and are able to be integrated and used holistically. And then what are the common reporting that you need to do, right? Because I think if you start with some key common reporting and use those as business requirements for what you're trying to drive as the outcome, that's going to be able to tell the story of how do I bring all this data in? How do I then produce valuable information that can help drive decision making? And then when you layer on the AI on top of it, it's a natural synergy. And then it produces a very strong data repository where it's one single source of truth that can provide really good information for the agency to produce really good results to make decisions.
For our listeners here, we're talking about really interesting high-level strategy, both from the roadmap and then a little bit on the data governance side and data management. Let's double click for a second. I'm curious, one of the key things that's throughout things that you're both writing on LinkedIn and your AI strategy is human-led with AI. And how do you build a human in the loop as a requirement? Now, that is said by a lot of people. One of the big challenges is how do you actually ensure that that's happening and it's not like a rubber stamp, right? So I'm curious just to get your thoughts on, what's your vision on human in the loop in an agentic AI world where you're starting to get processes that could run autonomous if you let them, and B, how do you make sure that process is not a rubber stamp or a PDF that sits somewhere on a policy, rather something that is embedded? You talked about workforce enablement. How does that get become something that's a day-to-day for the employees as well?
Yeah, I think the first part I'm going to address is for some of the projects that we've done, right? Like the AI with the invoicing. The way you do that is you need to make sure that you have strong partners in the business area, and they are attuned and aligned to the project, right? This is just basically project 101 is to make sure that it's not an IT driven solution where IT is the only one that understands the outcome and looks at the data. It really needs to be a holistic approach where you and the business are hand to hand walking through what are we trying to do? What is the product that we're trying to produce? And let them validate and sign off on is the results what you're wanting, right? And I am a big believer in that because I don't know transportation the way some of these engineers do, and I don't want to know those things, but I do know technology. But I need you as part of that key source to be able to validate, is it producing the right things? And as we move forward with digital delivery, which we're basically, Mark Williams, our executive director, is really pushing us to look at digital delivery and how it can transform the way we do transportation. We're going to need to bring in the engineers and really have them validate the information and make sure that it's producing the right, results to make sure that we're constructing things the right way. The other thing that we're doing is we are making sure human in the loop accountability is there by creating a AI academy. And so we have brought in a group of people selected by their leadership team all across the agency that are going to be AI champions. Those people know TxDOT. They know the information at a business level. We're going to train those individuals on AI, not only from an AI ideology perspective and understanding the basic principles, but also train them on the enterprise solutions that we're implementing that we want to enable them to do. And then we're basically going to ask those individuals that to drive, what are you using AI in your groups or your areas to do? And we want them to identify those projects and the automation that they're wanting to do. And then we're going to actually track it. And we're actually going to also push the accountability where, okay, if you're enabling something that is a front end, like a chatbot, right? We're looking at a lot of chatbots. A lot of people are, because that's such a quick way to identify information that's requested. But how are you making sure in your individual areas that those chatbots are producing the right results for the public? And we're really pushing that and helping understand what is not only the right information that's being produced, how are we ensuring that people are watching it? And like you said, not becoming just, check in the box. From an accountability perspective, we're also now pushing it from also a classification perspective that if they are going to do something AI, the accountability factor is going to be incorporated into their job expectations to make sure that what it's producing is the right results for the public, especially if it is a front-facing automation.
Yeah. Interesting.
So you've got, one thing that stood out as I read the new strategy doc, which, we'll make sure we link in the show notes for this, because it's definitely a good read, or you can put it into ChatGPT and summarize it. You've got over 200 AI use cases in your portfolio. And I mean, as we look at this, like a lot of agencies, I'll ask them about this and it's like they can maybe come up with 3 or 4 or 5, but you've got 200 different AI use cases. So tell me a little bit about how you avoid kind of the pilot purgatory, or even just how you approach piloting and moving on things. I know you've rolled out something called a readiness scorecard. So we'd love for you to kind of dig into what you're doing here.
Yeah, and I'm going to give Mark Williams that credit. As the executive director, he is very thoughtful. I mean, he's very much a techie. And so he can go head to head with you guys. But he's very thoughtful in how he rolls things out. He wants to make sure that we're just not leveraging AI to do things that doesn't make sense for the agency. And so he really developed the scorecard to look at several things. One is, do you have a business area that really wants to champion, right? Because if IT is producing something, to your point, Dustin, it's going to be another proof of concept that we're just going to spend money needlessly to do. But is there a champion? And is it truly a problem that we need to solve for the state or for the agency? Is there data available, good data available? Because if you have garbage in, you have garbage out, right? But do we have good quality data to really produce good results from the automation, the agentic AI? The third thing is, are there any ethical implications to that, right? Because we are transportation, and government sometimes lags behind just from an overall, how should we do things? And we are very cautious at how we deliver transportation. We definitely never want to get ahead of the curve when it comes to policies and rules. And so are there any ethical implications from a legality perspective with using that data, and overall from a just practice perspective with engineering techniques? And then really making sure what are the security implications, right? From a data perspective, are we using sensitive information that we shouldn't be? And right now we're being very thoughtful. What we're consuming into the AI is not sensitive information. So it's open records data, right? Open data. And so, are there implications just from a security perspective? Are we exposing the agency to anything? And, we've worked really hard the last 6.5 years to build out a very strong security landscape. And you mentioned that with the ransomware that happened in 2020, which, by the way, I just came, so that was not on my watch. But on my watch, we really have developed a very strong security program. And so taking that, are there any security implications that could jeopardize the agency? And we definitely don't want to do that. So that is the scorecard. And so now we're going to put those 200 use cases into that scorecard and really develop a prioritization list, because we can't do 200 cases. That's just silly. I think it's great that people have developed those ideas, but really, what are the ones that really should move forward with the biggest bang for the buck for the agency?
So I think one of the things you talked about is democratizing AI. Dustin and I just did a webinar on vibe coding yesterday, and in live time built out a AI training platform in 40 minutes of a conversation. And so the possibility are endless, and the 200 use cases is an example of that. And you talked a little bit about the need for the risk management, and I want to get a little more into your brain on how you're thinking about the balance between centralized governance and security, because one of the tensions that exists here, I'm sure you have that in your organization too, is how many employees do you have that providing services under the CIO's office for TxDOT?
We are 13,500 people strong. So, and we are statewide from a delivery perspective. And, Texas is big. And I will say we are probably the largest network when it comes to our system delivery.
So 13,000, that's bigger than some small towns in the US. And so when you're thinking about the balance of how IT manages the control and safety, governance, security, risk management, and then the other side, the business units wanting to run and build kind of their own requirement. How do you balance that tension, and what's the framework? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about the methodology, but getting into the more the realities of that tension, how do you manage that across such a wide organization?
Well, and so there's a multi-pronged answer to that. We spent the last 6.5 years really building customer trust and respect. I don't focus on just any technology. I focus on the technology that I'm hearing my customers really want. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, people are going to push the envelope unless you provide the enterprise tools for them to be effective. I am about creating a governance around what are you trying to do? What can I enable you to do, right? Because, I've been in organizations where IT has to do everything, and it's just not sustainable long-term, especially when it comes to AI. I think there is a lot of benefits to enabling your organization to be, self-sufficient in rolling out AI tools. So we are spending the next year to 2 years or more really developing a portfolio of what are the tools that I want to roll out. Like, what are the AI assistants that I want to roll out that I can provide licensing to the folks across the agency and let them go. And that is a key correlation with the AI champions, right? So we have over close to 200 AI champions. I want to provide them with some of those tools that are AI enabled. And I want to say, you go. We're going to teach you how to use it. You go and you figure it out, and you figure out where you can automate based on the area that you serve. So these past year, we've actually spent time really enabling AI assistants, but then providing the training around those AI assistants to people across the agency. We're now implementing other sandboxes of development tools that they can use. We've done that with Power Apps as well, because I do think we have power users inside this agency that, if done right, we can really have them work holistically with us, where they're going to inform us of what they're trying to do. But if we then enable the tools to give them to go ahead and do the development of not only AI as well as other power applications that they need, then what a great way to diversify the technology, capabilities across the agency, because we don't have all of the personnel that we need to really enable things to be done with AI. I don't think we need to. AI puts a lot of power in people's hands, and you don't need to necessarily be a programmer to do it. That's what we're doing.
In government, usually you see top-down adoption, meaning a executive level decides on a tool and then it's adopted. Right now, AI is the similar moment of transformation like the internet, where it wasn't a question if you're going to use it, people start using it. So we're seeing over 60%, right, of employees just using what's called shadow AI, but AI in its various forms, ChatGPT or recording of meetings and the like. And so to your point, it's a risk. So that's one bucket, but it's also an incredible opportunity because you can tap that demand and then direct it, navigate it in the right way of use cases that are governed in the right way, but also advantage of champions that are already existing. So I really agree with you on that concept, where you have this inherent base in your organization of business owners that are, championing AI. You just have to enable them.
Yeah, and I think risk is relative, right? Not everything is a risk, and I feel like if you harden everything, nothing gets done. And I'm very blessed the security team reports into me, and our CISO really believes in the alignment of making sure that security is in a place that's effective for the agency to operationalize, right? Because if you lock everything down, we can't do anything, and it inhibits progress. And so I respect security. Trust me, I do not want to have another ransomware, especially now it will be mine that I have to deal
Knock
with.
on wood. We should all knock on wood.
Hey, freaking men, man. But I do think that there is a healthy balance where you can secure the agency, but also give the agency the tools to be powerful.
This is a good segue into, as we talk about risk, you've been a member of the Texas AI Advisory Board, so you've been helping shape kind of the state's approach to AI-oriented risk, now also implementing it at an agency level. So Texas is unique, but we're seeing other states follow suit with kind of their own AI governance, the Texas Responsible AI Governance Act, or TxDOT. So how does that play into kind of this with TxDOT and how you're thinking about balancing kind of those risks associated with all of the AI stuff you have going on?
Yeah, I have a huge amount of respect for what comes down at the state level, because I think people are moving at such a fast pace that the state is really trying to determine what is the best policies to put in place, right? And TxDOT being one of them. DIR is trying very hard to understand what policies, what training do we need to put in place to really help the whole state. And that you don't want to underestimate, because Texas is a big state. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to figure out where I can provide the most assistance to DIR. I do think that right now they've just rolled out the training that people can take, right? Because I think training is very important. You need to understand what AI really is from a risk perspective, from a development perspective. And then they are trying to also catalog what AI tools are being developed so that they can have a good portfolio of that, so that they can understand, is the state, putting ourselves at risk. And so, it's a very powerful mandate, but it is a very vast mandate. So I'm just trying to do what I can to help.
We talked about agentic AI, but we're already starting to hear kind of multi-level agentic architecture where, to our listeners, what that essentially is talking about, okay, you may have one agent running a process, but you can start creating clusters of agents running entire flows, right? Think of a product you're building, and one is a designer, and another is a front end and a back end developer, and another one is a project manager. I'm curious, from an architecture perspective, you talked a bit about workforce. Is this something you're already planning for, looking ahead, or you need to let it play out a little bit more to understand where this technology is going?
No, it's going. It's going. So how we orchestrate all of the basic agents is something that we're doing, and actually we're doing it more from an operational management perspective. So we are right now in the midst of working on a project that has multiple agents all across certain areas that we support, the application side, the infrastructure side, and really pulling in logs and then using possibly down the road AI to figure out, okay, from an overall monitoring perspective, where, if you have an application issue, where is the problem occurring, right? Because right now what we're doing is, if you have an infrastructure guy going and search, okay, did we update something that may be causing an issue? You have an application person that may be going, well, this application has latency, what's going on? And the two don't tie in together. What we're seeing with this orchestration that you're talking about is, if you deploy certain agents across those areas of environment that you want a holistic view, how do you then orchestrate so that you can get all of the monitoring in place and all the error loggings in place so that you can then quickly diagnose the issues? I want to stay away from naming, vendors and stuff like that, because I don't want to get y'all in trouble and I don't want to get myself in trouble. But we are right now looking at how can we drive down operational overhead by really applying certain agents in critical areas that we need to really quickly identify problems, because we don't have a lot of time when things are brought down. Like, for example, our ERP environment, right? If we have any type of outage, we need to get it up because it's processing checks or it's processing invoices to get paid. And so those are the areas, and we really want to have a holistic look, is when that ERP system is down, I want it to be like in minutes, where that AI agent can look across all the different environments and tell me exactly, it's an infrastructure issue, there's a firewall rule that is being blocked or something. That's the stuff that we're doing right now. So we are right in it, and I'm hoping in the next year we're going to see some huge results with that.
That's exciting too, because it's the back office challenges that you're solving, right? Not just the shiny objects and the front end stuff.
Correct.
So, looking 5 years out, if we can even begin to forecast 5 months out, but I get to ask the fun question, right? 5 years out, I mean, how do you see AI changing the mission of TxDOT, or maybe enabling new things that we can't even begin to imagine today?
I'm excited. I think it's going to fundamentally transform transportation. And I think we have a great executive director who sees that vision as well. And I'm not saying that just because he's my boss's boss, but it takes leadership. And if you don't have executive leadership, I don't think TxDOT would be able to advance the needle as much with AI. But where I see it going is, I think it's going to automate a lot of the work that we're doing manually on the engineering front, right, to get roads built. So I think we're going to be able to expedite and reallocate resources to areas that can't be AI'd, right? And so, we can do plans quicker. We can do designs possibly quicker in certain areas. We can extrapolate information quicker. If people are coming to our website, think of how powerful it is to be able to use an AI agent to be able to look across at all of our large manuals and give the information to the customer, not in months or weeks, but in minutes, right? So I think it's just an exciting time right now to be in transportation. Just even the way we process invoices, you're already seeing that, is, we are a 30 million plus transactional agency a day. So we process $30 million of different transactions and payments a day to our vendors. So we are a large shop. And so think of how powerful it'd be if we could optimize and make more efficient some of the things that just drive the way TxDOT does day to day, right? So I'm just really excited about where it's going. I think the other thing is the adoption of technology, because these engineers, they know how to build roads, right? But they don't really understand the art of the possible yet with AI and technology, but I think they're getting excited as well. So just the excitement, the passion people have to go, okay, how can I apply some of this automation to areas that I've done for 30 plus years and really drive down the time it takes me to get things done? I mean, I'm just excited, Dustin. And I think even on, we're seeing with drones, right? Because we're multimodal. The excitement that we're seeing on being able to drive some of these automation to help us with surveying. We've got robots and robotic dogs going to areas that, usually in the past people have gone that are very high risk. So driving down the safety issues for our teams. You can just tell I'm excited, and I feel very blessed to be a part of this kind of strategy and this roadmap.
So Anna, I'll finish up on this question, which ties into that. So we work with a lot of other large state agency CIOs, and one of the biggest challenges they have is they're piloting different AI tools, and they're thinking about how does this become an enterprise-wide deployment or strategy or infrastructure, something that scales out of pilot mode. So if for all the, for our listeners that are CIOs out there, what's your advice on how do you take this from experimentation to now something that's out in the wild and production level enterprise-wide system deployment?
Make sure your executive team understands the results and sees the results that you're trying to produce. That's job one. We can produce as many pilots as we want, but unless my executives see the outcome from a business perspective, I'm not going to achieve anything. The other thing is make sure that you build the relationships with the advocates in the business area that can help drive the results that really showcase transportation, like you guys articulated in the last question. That's how I do it, is I am not driving this because I'm so great, right? That doesn't fly. I'm driving this because my executive team is seeing proven results and good ROI where they are seeing outcomes that are making transportation more effective. And I think whatever area that you are in, being able to build that trust and respect at the executive level, and as well as with your business, to understand that, hey, I am a partner with you. I want to help you solve real problems in the workplace that really pertains to the mission of the organization. That is how you're going to produce results and buy-in.
That's a great segue into concluding our time together. It's been so fun to join you in talking about everything that's happening with AI and the great work that you're doing at TxDOT. So thanks for carving some time out to nerd out with Noam and I on the great work that TxDOT is doing.
Well, I appreciate you guys reaching out. I hope this was helpful, and I'm very passionate. I feel very blessed, and to call out TxDOT, it's a great place to be and a great time to be here. So thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely. And make sure you keep up with on LinkedIn. We'll post that as well. Follow her. She's fun to follow, and read the TxDOT AI strategy that's been updated for 2026. It's one of the first documents that we've seen in the government space that has referenced agentic properly as more than just a chatbot on the website. So you definitely want to take a look at that, and make sure you subscribe to the GovAI podcast on your favorite podcast platform of choice. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode.